This day in sports history. Looking for that perfect gift for the basketball fan in your life? Basketball Now is it. Newly updated for 2025, it spotlights 50 of the NBA's top stars. Think fast breaks, clutch threes, and buzzer beaters, captured in stunning photography with sharp, readable analysis. From rising stars to veteran icons, this book is a courtside pass to the game right now. Wrap up a slam dunk this holiday season. Pick up your copy of Basketball Now today at your favorite bookseller. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, the only 365-day history podcast dedicated to what happened on this day in sports history. This Day in Sports History is also a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more podcasts and more info at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's October 25th, and this day may be better known for its comedy of errors than anything else. There were also some triumphs. An old baseball veteran finally won the big one, and a tiger made a rather unusual appearance in a locker room, plus a few more things to talk about. So stick around. This will be the best 15 minutes or so of your day. Guaranteed. Let's start with what happened on this day in 1964, and it was a guy who had an outstanding career, but he had one mistake that defined his legacy. Jim Marshall set the NFL record for playing in 282 consecutive NFL games, and he still holds the record for fumble recoveries by a defensive end. But all of that is overshadowed by what he did on this day in the fourth quarter of a game against San Francisco. Here's announcers Lon Simmons and Russ Hodges calling the action for the 49ers that day.
Myra straight back to pass. Throws, completes it to Kilmer up at the 30-yard line. Kilmer driving for the first down, loses the football. It's picked up by Jim Marshall, who's running the wrong way. Marshall is running the wrong way, and he's running it into the end zone the wrong way. Thinks he's scored a touchdown. He has scored a safety. As he picked up that fumble, he ran about 60 yards the wrong way, threw the ball up in the air in sheer joy. His teammates were running along the far side of the field, Russ, trying to tell him to go back. He paid no attention. I tell you, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. What a happy fella he was.
Marshall said afterward that he saw his teammates waving their arms on the sideline, but he just figured they were cheering him on. Fortunately for the Vikings, it didn't cost them the game. Minnesota held on for the 27-22 win. On this day in 1986, it was the most unfortunate error in World Series history. Game 6 of the 1986 World Series between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Mets. It was a must-win game for the Mets, but with 2 outs in the 10th inning and trailing by a pair of runs, it looked pretty grim for the Mets, and the Red Sox were on the cusp of breaking the curse of the Bambino and winning their first title in 68 years. But the Mets rallied to tie it up at 5, bringing Mookie Wilson to the plate. Ray Knight was the base runner at second, and then this happened.
5-5 in a delirious 10th inning. Can you believe this ball game at Shea? Oh, brother. 3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
It is sad that a man who had a solid 22-year career, he won a batting title, will always be remembered for this one play. Now, Buckner had struggled with ankle and knee problems for several years, along with an Achilles tendon issue that he thought he'd ruptured in the ALCS, but there are others who bear some responsibility for this loss. At the end of the 7th, with the Red Sox leading 3-2, Sox skipper John McNamara pulled his young star pitcher Roger Clemens for reliever Calvin Schiraldi. Clemens was the Red Sox ace. He'd struck out 8 and walked just 2 in his 7 innings of work. He had thrown 134 pitches, though, which may have factored into the decision to pull him. After Lee Mazzilli singled, Schiraldi failed to get an out on Lenny Dykstra's sacrifice bunt. That allowed a sac fly from Gary Carter to tie the game at 3, and the game went to extra innings. In the top of the 10th, After a Dave Henderson solo shot and a run-scoring single by Marty Barrett, the Sox took a 5-3 lead in the bottom half. So in the bottom of the 10th inning, before the Mookie Wilson ground ball, before the Bill Buckner error, there were a couple of things that happened. Schiraldi did get the first two batters to fly out. They're one win away from the World Championship at that point. But then Gary Carter singled. Rookie Kevin Mitchell followed that up with another single. Ray Knight brought Carter home on a liner to right center to make it 5-4. And with 2 on and 2 out, McNamara went back to his bullpen and brought in sinker baller Bob Stanley to face Mookie Wilson. On a 2-ball, 2-strike pitch, Stanley threw a wild sinker that sailed to the backstop, and Mitchell scored to tie the game and move Knight to second. It was on the next pitch that Wilson sent the slow roller down the line that snuck under Buckner's glove, scoring Knight and completing the comeback with a 6-5 win to send it to the decisive Game 7. The Mets would win that one 8-5 2 nights later. So don't just blame Buckner's error. Calvin Schiraldi and Bob Stanley share the burden of the loss as well. Or you could just say it was the Mets' destiny. Along with their comeback win on this day, they had 3 come-from-behind wins in their National League Championship Series against the Houston Astros. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have 0 regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. On this day in 2003, the Florida Marlins won their second World Series title in only their 11th year of existence. Their first in 1997 was surprising because they were a young franchise and became the first wildcard team to win the championship. The 03 team was surprising due to the unlikely pairing of the then oldest manager to coach in a World Series and a young team that could not collectively grow a full beard and yet played fearless on the big stage. 72-year-old Jack McKeon was an old baseball soul who had coached in minor league backwaters and in the majors for San Diego, Cincinnati, and Oakland. But he was young at heart. Despite the generation gap or gaps, McKeon was able to relate to his bright young pitching staff that included Josh Beckett, Dontrell Willis, Carl Pavano, and Brad Penny. He kept the dugout loose and the team played like it. McKeon had not started the year as the manager, though. When he came out of semi-retirement in May of 03 to apply for a job with the Marlins, he figured he'd make a good scout for the team. Instead, he found himself in charge of the team that was 10 games back in the standings to standing on top of the baseball world. On this day, it was Game 6 at Yankee Stadium, and McKeon started Beckett on the mound on just 3 days' rest. He just had a gut feeling eschewing the stats that said pitchers starting in the World Series on just 3 days' rest win less than a third of the time and give up an average of 6 earned runs a game. McKeon's hunch paid off, though. Beckett was masterful in pitching a complete game, 5-hit shutout. The Marlins picked up a run in the 5th, added another in the 6th, and that was all they needed. The 2-0 win gave the Marlins their second World Championship in their 11th year as a franchise and gave Jack McKeon his first World Series ring in his long journey of a career. He was the oldest to win it until 2022, when Dusty Baker led the Houston Astros to a championship at the age of 73. On this day in 2008, Texas Tech kicker Matt Williams hit 9 PATs in a 63-21 win over number 19 Kansas. Now, that does not seem like that big of a deal, right? The 8th-ranked Red Raiders scored 9 touchdowns. He's a kicker. Why shouldn't he hit 9 short kicks? Well, it's not what he did on this day that's the story. It's how he got there. 5 weeks earlier, Williams was just a regular old Texas Tech student. He loved football, and he played back in high school. But on September 20th, Williams was at AT&T Stadium to watch Texas Tech play the University of Massachusetts. Williams was the one guy that was picked from a crowd of 53,000 that day to participate in a between-quarters contest to win free rent for a year. Williams nailed a 30-yard field goal to win the contest. The crowd cheered his good fortune, and Williams was on the phone calling his mom when a guy wearing a Texas Tech shirt hollered for him. It was a graduate assistant who told Williams that Coach Mike Leach wanted to see him. Williams hung up the phone call with his mom, and he went to talk to Coach Leach. 5 weeks later, he was in a Red Raiders uniform kicking 9 extra points, and Leach was elated. After struggles with his starting kicker throughout the early part of the season, he was pumped to have a guy consistently kick it through the uprights. Williams finished out the season and then was the starting kicker in 2009 and 2010, all thanks to the moxie he showed in winning a kicking contest. Speaking of some coaching Mavericks, how about what NBA coach Dick Motta did on this day back in 1980? Motta was the coach of the newest NBA franchise, the Dallas Mavericks, and he thought his young team needed some motivation at halftime of a game against Golden State after not rebounding well and not playing with much effort in the first 24 minutes. The game was in Oakland, and the circus happened to be in town at the same time. Motta, on his way back to the locker room, happened to walk past a young lady with a basketball-shooting monkey and a rebounding tiger on leashes. Now, they were preparing to do the halftime show and to promote the circus. Motta paused for a moment and asked her if she would bring the tiger back to the locker room when she finished up her act. He had an idea. Jim Spanarkel was a Mav at that point, and he recalled that moment in vivid detail.
He started with his halftime speech, and we were all sitting there, feeling, well, how are we going to pull ourselves out of this one and win a game in the second half? And the next thing you know, he walked out of the locker room, and in comes this tiger with the head on it, I mean, the size of a refrigerator, and guys started headed into the showers and really fleeing pretty quickly. And Motta just laughed. I mean, he thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And once we realized this tiger was on a chain and really wasn't gonna, it was more passive than aggressive. But when you're looking eye to eye to a tiger, I don't care whether it's passive or not, the thing you're thinking is aggressiveness.
So, did it work? It did not. The Mavs got outscored by 10 in the second half and lost 86-79 to the Warriors. Motta had only one regret about the incident, but it wasn't bringing the tiger into the locker room. Instead, he said years later that he wished he'd put the monkey in a Mavs uniform for the second half because it shot better than most of the players he had. And on this day in 1975, it was another Battle of the Sexes match. So I've talked about the 2 Bobby Riggs matches against women on this podcast over the past few months. There was the Mother's Day Massacre win over Margaret Court, and then the loss to Billie Jean King in the Astrodome. Now, the 70s was a decade that focused a lot of attention on women's rights with the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in 1972 and ratification in 1979. That also trickled over to sports with Battle of the Sexes events permeating primetime television into the early 80s. Well, on this day, it was back to the tennis court for a pair of singles matches. Bjorn Borg played Virginia Wade, and Ilie Nastase squared off against Yvonne Goolagong. The rules for this special event were different and slanted to favor the women, really. The men were allowed only one serve, they could not come to the net unless a shot forced them to, and they had to cover the doubles alleys. Under those rules, Borg beat Wade 6-3 in their only set. Nastase and Goolagong were tied 5-5 in their lone set, but then Goolagong started to hit those alleys to her advantage, and she won 7 straight points, and then the set 7-5 to win the $5,000 prize. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Did you know that there are more Lego minifigures than there are actual people on Earth? That's all I've got for you today. And hey, if you've got a moment and you haven't done so already, how about leaving a 5-star rating? And if you're listening on Apple, well, you could write a quick review if you like. It helps the show get noticed. Great if you can, no problem if you need to mosey along. Either way, I'll be back tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.